information provided on Dr. Tom Roselle Live by Dr. Tom Roselle, D.C., interview guests, show co-hosts, or substitute hosts is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It is for general information purposes only. Information from this broadcast should not replace the appropriate consultation and examination process by a licensed physician. Always consult your own physician prior to changing any current medical directive or prescription.
Hey everybody, welcome. Dangerous Health with yours truly. I've got another great program for you, one that you really need to know quite a bit about if you want to keep yourself healthy, if you want out of pain. And again, we're going to go back to that intestinal system, but in a different way today. There's so many of us that are suffering from pain on an ongoing basis, and we kind of put it off. You know, our hands, our joints, it's random sometimes. It goes from shoulder to shoulder to the back of our head. Headaches that just won't go away, knee pain, ankle pain. You don't know why it's there. So what do? You dope up on all kinds of medications, which is not really okay because that just continues to perpetuate other issues. So here's the deal. We're going to walk through it a little bit, and I'm going to give you some clues of what you need to really get done. Coming up on the 20th of this month that we're in, August already, Dr. Zhang and I will be presenting an evening on constipation, but not so much just why your gut's all plugged up. We're going to be talking about all the things that your intimacy of your intestinal tract, your microbiome, and the rest of your body, the different conditions that show up, the autoimmune conditions that show up, the joint pains that show up, all the things that you can't figure out why they're there. And in today's world, we're shutting down that amazing natural immune function. So let's put it together. Let's get into a little bit today what we're going to talk about. But I want you to join us. And all you need to do to make that happen is to go to rosellecare.com, ROSELLECARE.com, or just go to drtomroselle.com, or the old-fashioned way. You can call the office in Fairfax, Virginia at 703-698-7117, 703-698-7117, and register for the class. And I promise you, you're going to walk away with a ton of data. But see, the job is to give you the data, give you the information so you can be proactive, so you can do the things that are necessary to keep you well, strong, out of pain, no headaches, keep your heart regulated. All those things have to do with the initial stages of intestinal function and making sure that it's working properly. So we're going to do that today. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. I want you to really get it. I want you to understand it and be able to apply certain things. So let's do it. Did you know that depending on authors, that 70, 75%, some even stick it up a little higher, that your primary immunological natural immune system is mediated from your intestinal tract. So if that's the case, what's the far-reaching ramifications? Well, it's going to keep you well so you don't get sick, you don't get the flus, you don't get this new COVID variant that's out there, all those kind of things, if that system is working optimally. And if you do a search, you get into NIH, you get into Nature magazine, you get into the Townsend newsletter and so forth, you're going to see all those interconnected. The old nutritionists would say, you can't fix anything unless you fix the gut, in addition, parallel with, or even separately from taking any other course of action. So let's break that down. Let's talk about what it really means and why those things show up and can't be fixed. But we're going to show you how to fix it and what the important piece of the puzzle actually is relative to that. You know, there was an article that was written, and I have it in front of me, so I want to use it kind of as a reference point to begin with. It came out, not very recently, but it was published in the PubMed Central National Library of Medicine, and it was in 2021, so relevant, but not yesterday. And it says it talked about the interplay between the gut microbiome and the immune system in the context of infectious diseases and how it happens throughout life. So I just want to use this as a trigger point, because when you have an infection on an ongoing basis that never seems to want to go away, it has to do with the intestinal microbiome, the microbiome, meaning those good bacteria and then they sometimes get overwhelmed by the bad bacteria for a lot of reasons. And a lot of this can be changed simply by changing your dietary habits and making sure there's good microbiome in it and so forth, but in a guided fashion. So let's talk about those infectious diseases. And infections today, we know, are the leading cause of death, and particularly in lower income countries around the world. So if that's the case, and we get into our society where we try to dampen everything, suppress everything with a drug of some sort, but with 70 to 80% of your immune cells being present in the intestinal tract, there's an intimacy, there's an integral play here of that good microbiota. That means your good bacteria and your immune reaction and how the body works. So let's remember that just for a second. And then what I want you to bear is the actual application, or sometimes called the conclusions. And the thing with it is that traditional medicine is finally understanding what the old nutritionists knew years ago. And they know that there are different types of immunological reactions, from local to something called innate. That's your natural immune system. That's how your body finds things. The cooperation of all the systems in your body, that's called systemic immunity. And they're trying to find out approaches to target these processes. Well, here's the deal. Your body has the approach. It understands what's going on, and it goes into automatic reaction. So what's the first thing that takes place? It's your spinal system, your brain, that computer and peripheral nervous system that triggers things automatically and intentionally to make it work the way it's supposed to. So if that's the case, if your nervous system isn't working, your gut's not going to work. And if your gut's not going to work, you can't protect yourself against immune mediated situations. Now, let's take that one more step, because we want to know really what the hands-on is here, because this is a topic that I want you to join us on. So here's the situation. Let's go to the intestinal tract. So your intestinal tract is this long tube, right? And it has a lot of different functions. And it has this outer layer, it's called the mucosa. And that mucosa is from your mouth all the way down to your tail end. And it has a variety of innate and things that modulate. They're called adaptive immune cells. And then they include something called lymph tissue. And if you look it up, it's called lymphoid tissue. And then it breaks it down and goes to granulocytes and dendrocytes and macrophages. And, you've heard all these terms over a period of time, but you say, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then we start regurgitate them like, they mean something to us, but do they really do? Well, after we get done talking today, they'll have a little greater meaning. So you really understand that when somebody tells you something, you get it, right? They act by killing the incoming bacterium and viral patterns and fungal patterns and so forth, these pathogens. And they trigger, if the body's healthy, very specific soluble mediators, things that step in. Now, you've heard them all the way through COVID. You've heard them across the board. They're called interleukin pathways, interleukin 10, interleukin 17, interleukin 22. Those are the good guys. Those are the guys that are supposed to help you. There are different types of white blood cells. White blood cells like neutrophils. They're the greatest number in a normal, healthy person. And these neutrophils, they form a outside and extracellular, if you will, to outside the cell trap. And they go after these guys, right? So this local presence or induction of this protective immunological response goes after these different types of antigens that are mediated from viruses and bacteria and mold and so forth. And, it forms a barrier, if you will, not allowing these pathogens to get inside the system. So when you go to the doc and he runs what's called a CBC, or complete blood count, that's going to show if they do what's called a cell morphology. That means that they're going to take the red blood cell count and they're going to break it down. They're going to take the white blood cell count and they're going to break it down into what? Neutrophils, lymphocytes, basophils, eosinophils, and so forth. And forgot the monocytes. Monocytes are in there too. So they're going to look at these immune mediators, if you will, and it's going to be measured based on what's other happening. So if you see that there's an increased neutrophil count, the next step, if you want to find out where it's really coming from, is to do what? Is to do a interleukin test and see if interleukin 10 is kicking in. It's an anti-inflammatory cytokine. That's all interleukin means. Interleukin 10 is good for you mediator, but it mediates inflammation. It's against inflammatory reactions. So if you have a bad gut, intestinal tract, and you want to know if there's a problem going on, you do a white blood cell count and you look at basophils and you look at eosinophils. If both of those guys are elevated, there's a good suspicion that you may have parasitic infection that may be causing some of this. Now we want to find out, is your body fighting? So then we use the interleukin pathways. And so here's the deal. The inflammatory cycles, if you will, the anti-inflammatory cycles are mediated by this interleukin 10 and TGF beta, which suppresses functions of multiple immune cell processes. And they promote the expansion of something called regulatory T cell responses. That's the primary defense piece, right? So if that's going on in the body, it's like, okay, so, why is it not working for me? Why is it breaking down? So that's the next question, right? So the next question is, let's take a look at what you've been doing up until now. If the intestinal system has been battered by all kinds of damaging foods, if it's been battered by ongoing chronic constipation, which if you've been listening to the program, there's multiple pieces for the reasons for that. So now the cells become unresponsive, the tissue becomes hardened, it has more holes in it. It's called intestinal permeability. Now you start absorbing things that you shouldn't absorb without other processes taking place, meaning that you don't digest them properly. They're not being broken down into subcomponents. Your immune system hasn't gone after it before it gets into the tissue, but now it's absorbed in. So what do you have now? Now you've got an inflammatory reaction that is going to cause you pain and not feeling good and random and soreness and all those things all at one time. So to fulfill the function of immunological reaction, and this is an article I just read out of the Lancet, and it was in the Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology, that's liver function. And it said that this system, this innate system to fulfill this process, this mucosal protection that we talked about a few minutes ago, and to be able to produce a variety of innate and adaptive cells. That means adaptive means what it says, right? An ability to change and go after and do and modify and so forth. Your innate system is your primary immunological response that is designed, if you're in a decent place, when you haven't eaten junk and you're getting a little exercise and you get proper sleep and you're protecting yourself instead of eating the sugars, the sodas, the coffee, the black teas, the fast food, the fried foods, the GMO modified, all the junk. You know the mantra, right? So these cells then go on to support barrier protection and function through direct killing of the invading pathogens. So you get something like a virus that's coming in your body, you get something like a bacteria that's not there or a parasitic infection. If the body is working properly, if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and you haven't messed it up by doing all the junk that you normally do, you protected the nervous system, the nerves are firing, they're not being impaired at local level, meaning the spinal level or further up at the brainstem and the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve is working, then things should go into your favor. You should be stronger and better and more capable of doing that. So when we're looking for this process, we look at the breakdown of these different white blood cells. And we just talked about the neutrophils. The neutrophils are the local induction of protective immunological response. And it kicks in the cytokines that we talked about. We said interleukin 10, interleukin 17, interleukin 22. Those are the good guys. Those are the guys that you want there. And they form, if you will, this protective trap or barriers so it can't go in and cause this inflammatory reaction that makes you feel terrible. So what we want to make sure that you understand is that you're in control, and you can change this as a very direct, intentional situation. But when we get that leaky gut, that permeable gut, because you've been eating all kinds of garbage, you haven't been protecting the microbiome, then bacteria and funguses and protozoa and microbes and viruses and so forth enter without anybody stopping them. You know, the picadors, as I like to talk them. Your intestinal system, one of the primary immunological reactions it produces is something called IgA antibody. And that IgA is produced from the mucus platform of the mouth to the tail end, right? So if it's not there at the levels that it should be, or it's modified and mutated, now you have this chronic inflammatory response in your gut, and you end up with locally things like mucus colitis or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome, all the things that we've been talking about. But you can change it. You're not stuck with it. But here's the deal. When these inflammatory elements that are now being allowed to kind of free entry into your system get into the rest of your body, things hurt. Your head hurts. You have migraine headaches. You have tension headaches. Your sinuses feel like somebody's sitting on your face. Your gut's always working. Your wrists, your hands are always sore, and you can't figure out why. So you go to the good doc, and he says, well, you have what? Arthritis. Well, arthritis is a change. Arthros means joint. Itis means inflammation. So you have arthrosis and you have arthritis. Arthrosis means there's not an inflammation at that moment in time, but when you get this inflammatory response, now you goes into an itis pattern. So what we have to do is we have to find out, one, how to stop it, and secondly, what we can do about repairing the damage. And after pretty close to 5 decades of treating people, I can tell you that the body is this amazing, wonderful, reparative, restorative machine that you can turn virtually anything about. Just adding a good probiotic. You know, everybody's selling stuff out there, and you got to be real careful. You notice on the program, I really don't push you to buy anything. I try to inform you. I want you to understand it, but you got to do your homework, because there's a lot of garbage that's out there. If you come on the 20th at the Roselle Center for Healing, we're going to walk you through with the good guys, the bad guys, what you can do about it, how you can treat it. And Dr. Zhang, an amazing TCM practitioner, traditional Chinese medicine doc, great reputation overseas when he was living in Shanghai. He's going to take that knowledge. I'm going to tell you what you can do. We're going to walk through it kind of hand in glove, and we're going to show you what an irritable bowel disease process really is. We're going to talk about leaky gut. We're going to talk about the bacteria and the microorganisms that shouldn't be there, the ones that need to be there. We're going to talk about that guy that I've mentioned a few times called butyrate, most important piece of the puzzle. And butyrate is a short chain fatty acid, and you protect it and you bring it upgrade by changing other things within the system. Temporarily, you can add some butyrate to the system, but again, unless it's what it's telling you is that there's something wrong someplace else, and you've got to change other pieces of the puzzle. Otherwise, you're using nutritional products as medication, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to be able to help yourself on an ongoing basis. You know, I had a patient come in the other day, and patient was on vacation and they were doing really, really well. And all of a sudden they came back in and everything was sore, everything was hurting. And I said, oh, come on, what'd you do? So I felt their acupuncture pulses and intestinal tract was really weak. Stomach was not working the way it was supposed to. I said, yeah, you broke what you've been doing to save yourself for all this time. And they kind of put their head down and said, yeah, I couldn't help myself. We were doing X, Y, and Z. I said, we got a choice. We all have a choice all the time. Are you going to subject yourself to the things that are emotionally addictive to you? Or are you going to say, my life is in my hands? It is a do-it-yourself program. It is something that, that I want to take care of ongoing. Years ago, as you know, many of you have bought copies of it and for yourself and family and friends. My book, Ageless Health, Health is a Do-It-Yourself Program, was written specifically to let you know and to show you how to take care of yourself, that your health is in your hands, not in the pharmacopoeia. It's not in the surgeon's hands. It's not in some PA's or nurse assistant or whatever. It's in your hands. It's up to you to learn as much as you possibly can to change what's going on in your world so your body says, oh, I can breathe now and make a difference. So on the 20th, I'm going to show you how to do that. Come and talk to me. And we're going to answer questions. And we're going to try to make this really something that you can use and move forward and maybe get your life back. If you start looking at all the different type of cells within the system, and we're talking about the gut, and you're going to look at things like goblet cells, and you're going to look at mucosal cells and enterocytes, and it gets crazy. Well, we're going to break it down in a very simple form. I mean, those of you who are, crazy that want to learn all this stuff, talk to me. Maybe I'll set up a class and we can do this thing for a morning, and I'll walk you through what really takes place. But there's so many of us just want to know if this bacteria is present, it's going to go into the outer piece, the mucosal layer of the gut called the lumen, right? And it's going to penetrate, it's going to go in, and it's going to start cracking things. That's called permeability. And the good things and the bad things are going to both get in. The barrier is gone. The protection is gone. It's not existent anymore. So how do we fix it? How do we bring the swelling down? How do we stop the irritability? How do we stop the pain, which is the most important thing that we want to do? That is what we have to get done. When you look at immunological responses across the board, there's this whole system that's involved. Everything from the central thymus gland, which produces T cells, and that goes after viral patterns very specifically, and your bone marrow. Your bone marrow produces white blood cells that are the triggering mechanisms and things that we just talked about. So your organs have their function, but sometimes we don't pay attention to it. We go into this consideration that the only thing that can fix us is a drug. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case. You have to begin to understand how is the beauty of hand in glove orchestration, everything from your lymph system to your bone marrow to your thymus. And then we get into these things called Peyer's patches that's in the gut, and your tonsils, which years ago they used to take them out wholesale, and the lymph nodes, they're trapping areas and so forth. But that's just part of the puzzle. But we said that about 70% is your intestinal system. So if you can do something about that, if you can fix that, my gosh, everything else seems to work a whole lot better and gives you the opportunity. So we're going to talk about primary immunological response when it comes to the gut. We're going to talk about these other tissues a little bit as they relate to the intestinal system. There's a lot that you can do. So join us on the 20th, and we'll make this happen. So we're going to talk about immune system, that network that is, called you, and if you will, the biological systems that kick in like a cascade, one to the other, one to the other, one to the other, and what happens when you suppress it. having taken how many different vaccines, how many of you have been vaccinated with COVID vaccines, and then the boosters, and you've had your flu shot, and you've had this shot, and all these other things, and you wonder why you're still getting sick, and maybe you're getting sick more often. Well, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about that gut, and we're going to talk about immunological complex, and I want you to join us because you're going to walk away with a ton of data that you wouldn't have had otherwise, because that's what we do. We're here to give you the information. We're here to make sure that you can be proactive in your own life. I'm here every week with a brand new episode to give you data, to put power into your hands, to make you responsible for you. But join us on the 20th. And remember, one very, very special platform that I spring from, and only that one. That's why you don't see me selling a lot of stuff. I love you all. Have a great day. Bye.
you.